Welcome. Thanks for joining us, whether you're watching this live or whether you're coming back and watching this on replay, to all the men in the Warrior Within Facebook group, Men's Circle. This is a pretty cool moment, a cool experience for me. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this interview and for kind of introducing you all to someone you probably already know, but hopefully we'll get to know a little bit more over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. I first met Asher in 2016 at a men's event in Sydney. I heard him speak and spoke to him briefly and felt a connection with him, probably unlike a connection that I'd ever felt with another man before. And in early 2017, I moved to Melbourne with my girlfriend, and Asher was kind of the very first connection that I had down there, that I made down there, and we started to hang out, and our connection kind of deepened. Sometime during that year is when he began hosting a men's meditation series, which I went to, which would eventually become the Warrior Within Men's Circle that you're now a part of, that we're here in. That was my first introduction to men's work, and it came at a time of like total chaos in my life. My relationship had imploded. My sense of self had been shattered. I was kind of dependent financially on my girlfriend as I struggled to start my coaching business. And the next 18 months would be some of the hardest of my life. And Asher, as well as the men in this circle, were integral in helping me not only get through that time, but to go on to build a beautiful life full of meaning and purpose with my now fiance, Maret, and family. He's the president of Meditation Australia, certified Wim Hof instructor, certified life coach, certified heart math instructor. I'm going to miss some things here, and this is in no order in particular. Owner of the Fifth Direction, the gym and sacred space in St. Kilda. Founder, of course, of the Warrior Within Men's Circle. Father of a beautiful and astoundingly profound 5-year-old boy, Jack. Former Bachelor of the Year. Someone who I consider a mentor and a friend, and someone who I'm honored to be sitting down with today. Asher, welcome to the first episode of the Warrior Within interview series.
Thanks, man. It's an absolute pleasure to be sitting here with you. I was just listening to you recounting that life from those years ago, and I was just laughing because I remember at one point, man, we stuck you on a mattress in a Buddhist center for a little while, and I just had this narrative playing in my mind about those days. And wow, it seems like a long time ago, and it also seems like yesterday.
Oh, I remember that. I remember literally after being kicked out by my girlfriend, and kind of walking the streets with a big bag full of my clothes and some books. And I think messaging you and reaching out and saying, is there anywhere to stay? And you'd introduced me to the guys at the Buddhist Center, and I reached out and they had a room there, and that's where I was for about a week. One of the most interesting and probably strangely peaceful weeks of my life, actually.
Yeah, man, not a bad place to kind of, do the work, because you were definitely under the ground at that point.
Yeah. Well, you talk about being under the ground, and now as I coach people and move through life and navigate my way through life, the presence that I feel that I bring to situations, and also people, and how I'm able to help them, I reflect back on that time, that 18 months that I spent with you, and just realize how much that's informed by the things I learned from you and from that time with you. And I think the what I'm starting to realize is the biggest, the most profound thing that I got from that time that informs me so deeply now, was and is death. And facing death and looking it in the face, and really the underground work, the dirty work, the ashes work that we talked about so much during that time. What's the underground work? What's the living underground? What's that all about?
It's about kind of, moving towards your fears, moving towards your discomfort, isn't it? And rather than doing what kind of most human beings do, which is find a way to numb that out or distract yourself from it through, work, or you name whatever distraction you care to name. It's actually turning towards it and examining it, and allowing the descent to happen rather than fighting against it, and then realizing that once you're down there, that's the place where you can grow. And as I like to say, kind of not trying to come back up again until you're almost comfortable, or actually you are comfortable down there. Because too many people, they dip in and they go, oh shit, I hate this, and they're immediately trying to resurface again through whatever method, and it's too soon. And you often see in the myths that we talk about the way that kind of story unfolds.
We talk about underground, and we talk about not coming up, and you described me once as a night walker, and I mean, that comes up so often for me. But what exactly do you mean by going underground? Like, for a man in his life, what does that even look like?
Well, as I said, we've all got these wounds, we've all got these pain points, and we normally develop lives so we don't actually have to address them. But it's actually addressing those fears, isn't it? It's looking them right in the eye and allowing them to take you wherever they need to take you, so that you can learn from them. That's all it is. Because we spend most of our lives, wanting to feel comfortable or wanting to feel okay with everything. And when something that is really an entry point to that underground part of you comes along, we avoid it like the plague. But the idea is let it come, because you're probably going to go down at some point anyway, right? Like something's going to drag you down, whether it's your wife leaving you, breaking up with your girlfriend, dare I say it, Nathan, or a sickness, or a loss of a family member, or something which is going to take you into grief. And as Robert Bly says, as men, we have to learn how to grieve, because from that place is where you discover everything about yourself. It's where you discover your purpose. It's where you discover everything. It's where you discover the goal. And then the idea is to bring that back and use it to be of service, right? And I think if you look at your trajectory of your life, man, and the trajectory of mine, that's essentially what's playing out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And when you talk about not wanting, it's like not desperately clawing at the ground to pull yourself out.
Yeah.
A lot of people are potentially doing for their entire life, but instead, would you call it surrender, or
Yeah, definitely surrender, man. I mean, as you're saying that, what's coming up in mind is there's a metaphor that I used to use a while back, and actually, tapped into even what you were talking about death as well, because this idea that when you're born, you're basically pushed off a cliff, right? And inevitably you're going to hit the bottom. There's no question about that. So to me, it's like you can either spend your life kind of clawing at the tufts and the rocks down the side of the cliff trying to break the fall, which isn't going to happen, or you can actually just let go, enjoy the fall, maybe just check out the view, learn how to do a few backward somersaults on the way down, And to me, that's the metaphor right there. And I think too many of us are constantly clinging, and that's basically that was Buddha's definition of suffering. This idea of constantly clinging, and to me, it's like, isn't that just clawing at the walls of the cliff on the way down? When you're going down, bro. Yeah. So you may as well enjoy the ride.
I often find that my work has over this time kind of gotten deeper and deeper and deeper until I'm almost teaching the same thing to everyone to address every problem, and it all comes down at the end to let go.
Mm. Let go of what, do you think? Like fundamentally, because we say let go of everything, but can we define that a little more clearly? I wonder what are you actually letting go of?
Right. So like just saying let go
Mm.
in any situation, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And why is someone so afraid to let go? And how would anyone even know how to do that as well?
Yeah. I mean, these are all really big questions, man. I'm almost tempted to throw them back at you and see and what's coming up with you and your coaching work around that.
Yeah. Well, we spoke and we've been speaking lately, and I've been thinking a lot about death. And essentially a lot of what I talk about now is the polarity, and the words that I use is quit or commit. And I use that in reference now to relationships when we do relationship work. And it very quickly cuts to the core of things when you ask that question. Someone can come and start complaining about their partner. She's, if only she was this, if she doesn't stop nagging, we're constantly arguing, we're not aligned, all these things. And, right at that point, if you cut someone off and say, well, hey, quit or commit, like you don't have to be there. You always have a choice. I find that takes a lot of people back, is kind of this maybe realizing or understanding that they've always had a choice and that they've been choosing all along. A lot of people don't want to accept that. Instead, I think what I've seen is a lot of people trying to control the uncontrollable.
Mm.
So that aspect of asking, what is it that I need, that I need, or that I could or should quit in this moment, is kind of is quite a profound question, and it comes down to that aspect of trying to control the things that can't be controlled.
Yeah, but also I hear, if you're saying what can I quit in this moment, it's possibly another way of saying what can I let go of.
Right.
Yeah, and to me, if you're needing to quit something in a relationship like that, to me, you start to get into the world of conditions. You place these certain conditions on the relationship so that you get, what you need. Maybe circling all the way back to using it as a distraction from the things that you find uncomfortable. So I think, it all comes back to a pretty, it's the monomyth, right? It's the one story that we're all living to a certain degree. Yeah. Yeah, I find that interesting, talking that way, because essentially you're in a relationship because of fear or because of love, right? And I think that sort of taps right into what you're saying in terms of quit or commit. I think I asked a question as a comment in the post you just wrote an hour or so ago, basically saying, which of those things is playing the leading hand in your relationship, if you're honest with yourself. Because I know I can look at my own life, for example, and getting very intimate very quickly. But I know that I made decisions around relationships that were entirely based out of fear when I look back on them now. Certainly not coming from a place of love, which had, outcomes that have shaped my life. But I know that at the time that they were a product of fear-based decisions. And I don't regret them, because at the time, that's where I was. And that's what played out. So,
and you'll know that applies to my relationship as well. Not only the decision to be in the relationship, the decision for me to be in the relationship with Rhett stemmed from, the desire to prove to the world that I could have a girl that looked like that, which was the fear of being rejected, the fear of not being loved or not being liked. And the two of us co-created that. And it led us down some really kind of difficult paths to making some decisions that didn't serve us very well, until we kind of understood this concept and really faced the reality of the end of the relationship, and surrendered to the end of the relationship. And then from that surrender, what bubbles up is, well, now I can choose to be here from a place of freedom, from a place of love, not a place of obligation or fear. And that little process has formed the basis of our relationship, which is essentially every time we feel that we're slipping into that place of being here from obligation and from fear, saying, I think it's time to look at what we need to quit in this moment, what we need to let go of, and facing that. So we've done that in a relationship over and over, and it continues to be a ritual that we continue to do often. It's also what we teach the couples that we work with. And it has just kind of led me to the understanding that we're not really only facing the one big death at the end of it all. That big death is actually represented or is actually occurring. I love that Ram Dass, I heard him say the other day, I say it like he was just over, but I would say the other day, death is a ceremony.
Yeah.
Where you take off one outfit and you put on another. So can you explain how death is, how we're facing death all the time, whether we
I mean, there's a lot in what you just said there. I'm just sort of thinking about the best place to start. But I love what you said about Ram Dass's stuff, because he used to talk about dying into the moment. The idea being that every moment is a death. You take a breath, it's kind of like death, rebirth, right? And then that moment's gone, it's dead, and you move on to the next present moment, and then that's dead. And he sort of, he actually said we're dying into life. And I really like that. So yes, there's this idea of little micro deaths that are going on every moment. But this is the whole idea about life. It's wheels within wheels within wheels. I mean, you can look at the hero's journey like that too. You can say the hero's journey is the arc of my life, or you could go even bigger and say my hero's journey is the arc of many thousands of lives that I've lived. Or you can bring it all the way back in and say a single moment, a single breath is an entire hero's journey within itself. Think about the Wim Hof method, for example. When you stop breathing, it's almost like a refusal of the call, right? But you can actually see the wheels within wheels. But I liked what you said earlier about the way you kind of surrendered into the ending with Moret, because that's what's breathed life into your relationship. Not to mention that knowing you two people, you're both so willing to examine the dark cobwebbed corners of every part of yourselves and the relationship itself as a whole. And I think when I talk to you about being a night walker, which is something that Rumi talks about, that's what I meant. You almost get edgy if you're not examining some dark area of your life which is causing you a bit of discomfort.
Yeah.
So yeah, this idea of looking at endings, and I think a big issue with people's relationships is that yes, they say they love their partner, but what they're really saying is that they love the lovable bits. And there's parts of that person that they're not as overly enamored with, but they just kind of leave those parts to the side. And to me, the idea of unconditional love, and obviously we know that that's kind of an oxymoron in itself, because love is in and of itself unconditional. But yeah, that's kind of human nature, to just love the lovable bits and kind of leave the other bits to one side as if they don't exist. And my view of a relationship is that you need to love all of it, including the endings. And that may be the breakup of, the inevitable breakup of the relationship, because even if you stay together, one's going to die before the other, in most cases, and the other one's going to be left to, scatter the ashes in the yard, as they say. And so, yeah, can you learn to love the ending? A lot of people struggle with that.
I watched my 2-year-old nephew, Alex, as he stayed with us for 3 weeks over Christmas, and I had just the best time watching him learning every day, every moment, learning to use words and language to unlock and shift reality, which for him, I assume, are just sounds that he learns. And if he makes a sound in a certain way, that it produces a certain result. It was just so fascinating for me to watch. And I saw him fight sleep. And that concept of getting too tired to sleep was very interesting to me. But I watched him fight sleep, and then when he would finally sleep, I would watch him wake up and watch this moment or this time, whether it was 15 minutes or 20 minutes, where it looked like he was coming back from another place, right? And figuring it all out again and putting it all back together and relearning some of the stuff that he needed to learn to operate back in this reality. And I found myself wondering, where did he go, at that age? And then, of course, the next step is, well, how isn't that death?
Mm-hmm.
How isn't that death? How isn't every time we go to sleep, do we not have to surrender to the possibility that we may not open our eyes? And that really had me thinking about stuff. And so I wanted to ask you, I've met Jack. I haven't spent nearly as much time with him as I would like, but what's the biggest lesson you've learned from Jack?
Probably that, man. It's probably wrapped up in everything you just said there. It's the idea of, kids have an amazing way of just of being pure presence, and the idea of just being in the moment. For a 5-year-old kid, there really isn't much else. It's just the moment, and I love that in Jack. But also for me, just watching him, it's a little bit like with your nephew, just watching him figure shit out. It helps me to figure my own stuff out. And plus just the joy, anybody who's listening to this will know just the joy that having a child can bring you. I mean, just today, I was down at the pool with Jack, and we were in a wave pool, and just when the waves started, really firing up, he kind of launched himself at the first wave with his fist in the air, and he goes, I am the most powerful. And then literally the first wave hit him, and he lost his undies right down to his ankles. and he's just, and without missing a beat, without missing any joy, he just says, okay then, we'll just pull our pants up here. And I'm just never say to the world, I am the most powerful, because you'll have your pants pulled down, And I'm just I was just there's the lesson. Beautiful, right there.
I still remember during that time that I talked about in the intro of chaos in my life, financial and relationship and everything else, meeting you at the playland where Jack was playing around, and we were sitting down and at that time, I mean, every time we caught up, it was just super intense. We were talking about some real deep shit, and we were both going through some stuff together. And I remember he came over and I was talking to you about money. And I said, you know, we were talking about money and I was stressed about money. And he came over and asked what's wrong. And I didn't really know what to say to him, because at that time it would have been what, 3?
Yeah, 3.5. Yeah.
So I didn't know what to say to a 3-year-old about why I'm, you know, so upset and why I'm so stressed. How do you even explain that to a 3-year-old? And I kind of looked to you for guidance, and you just said, just ask him. just tell him, just ask him. So I said, you know, I'm a little bit stressed, you know, I think I said. And he said, why? And I said, well, because of money. And he said, of course, why? And I thought, well, I don't have enough of it. And of course, you know what he's going to say. He says, just why? But the way he was asking why was so, it was just like he was just, it was something that he just couldn't understand, that he just wanted to know, and it just kind of cut straight down. And then I think we asked him, I can't remember the rest of that story. I don't know if you do, but I think I asked him, what is money? And his answer was, as always, so profound. And I can't recall it right now, but if I do, I'll repeat it. But the conversation.
I think the interesting part there is, you know, like asking why. Like sometimes even if you do that of yourself, you can cut to the core pretty quickly. You know, if there's a genuine, you know, why am I concerned about that? You start to unravel things pretty quickly if you're honest with yourself. And so I guess when you've got a 3.5-year-old kid looking at you with those doe eyes and asking why in that way, it makes you dig in, and you really did. And so I think sometimes that's all it takes, right?
Right. And you obviously hear some people getting or expressing annoyance at those questions of continual questions of why, and perhaps coming up with some answer to just get the kid off your back.
Well, maybe this kid we're talking about is your own inner child. Right. Because, you know, just to get him off your back, to stop him asking questions is you know, not to go underground.
Right.
And so you can sort of loop it all the way back to there, because, you know, the inner child in you is constantly asking these questions. And, you know, Robert Bly used to say, you know, growing up as a man is learning how to father yourself. And so maybe there's something profound in there around asking, allowing the inner child within you to ask those questions and to be genuinely present to that part of yourself and try to answer as best you can. Because, you know, most people would be dismissive of someone like Jack when he's asking those questions, but you, because you're the night walker, so to speak, you genuinely dug in and sort of thought, yeah, well, why am I concerned about that? And you tried to be as honest as you possibly could, which to me is doing the work, right? So, you know, it takes two to tango, and I think those exchanges you have with Jack only work because of who you are as well as who he is.
When did you shave your head, and why?
That is such a random question. I can't remember exactly when. I had really long hair for ages. You might have seen that.
Yeah.
So I think it was just kind of going radically the other direction. I don't even know why. I think it was, no, that's not true. It was getting shorter and shorter, and that's right. It was getting shorter and shorter. And I just got to a point where I was like, you may as well just go all the way, you know. So yeah, I don't want to go back. It's great.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today because I went and got a $55 haircut.
Right.
And then just before this, I had a shower and I was like doing it. And I thought, you know, I've had a shaved head before, and there's something absolutely beautiful and easy about it. And that question popped into my mind, so I thought, why not? I'll ask it.
Well, it's actually interesting because I did my Kundalini yoga teaching course last year, and of course, you know, they're all about the long hair and the long beard. So I'm probably a bit of an oddity being a Kundalini teacher without the flowing locks and the flowing beard.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It seems every time I talk to you, I find out something new about you and new about your life. And honestly, you're a person in my life who there's just so much to you that it seems like whatever kind of lesson I'm grasping for in the moment, or whatever I'm trying to explain or explore, or whatever concept I'm trying to explore, it seems like I can. There's always something from your life and from what you've told me that I can reach to. It just seems like you've had so many lives. Right now, where you're at, like, can you share a little bit about what's going on for you right now in life, and maybe what's coming up, what's ahead for you?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer the question. I'm just trying to think kind of the best place to start, because, you know, as with all of us, it always appears like there's a lot going on, right? Yeah, I mean, for me, I've kind of felt really called to action this year to sort of step up in certain ways. And I think that's partly because of what's going on around us. You know, we've kind of started the year with this, you know, with the fires, and it kind of really threw me for a loop. I really felt quite overwhelmed for a little while. I wasn't quite sure what to do with my emotions around that, you know, particularly having a 5-year-old boy. And there were lots of triggers for me. So I was feeling, you know, there were days when I was feeling angry. There were days when I was feeling just so much grief that I had, you know, it was hard to kind of breathe. Until it became literally hard to breathe lately in Melbourne. But so yeah, there's been a lot of kind of stuff going on around that. But at the end of the day, when I sit and I meditate and I sit still, it's calling me to action. You know, and I was saying to the guys just last night, like, it's almost like that fire is symbolic, and it's kind of lit a fire inside me. And that's the fire that I need to work on, that raging fire inside me. You know, the solar plexus chakra stuff, that, you know, the personal sun, the fire in the belly sort of deal. Like, there's really no excuses now for me to not go out there and just give my everything. You know what I mean? It's like, what is preventing me? Like, I know I have so much more to do, to give, so much more potential, and it's only sort of dawned on me at the beginning of this year that I've been holding back.
Just on that, it seems quite clear to me when I hear you talk about your life and the things that you've accomplished, which we don't have to go into. Needless to say, that you have accomplished a lot of pretty amazing things in your life that 90% of the population would not have experienced. And you did it quite young, and it kind of went all throughout your life. It's quite clear to me that you're able, once a decision is made, to follow through on things and create things. I won't say easily, but powerfully. And you say that you're feeling, you're heeding the call now, and that you've been holding yourself back. Do you know why you were holding yourself back, and what that period was like?
I think, you know, I'm probably talking about the chapter that's come, you know, post corporate career, post,
Right.
You know, the health diagnosis, and losing some family members and close people in my life. It's probably post all that, and I guess it's taken a while for me to gain the confidence that just that assuredness of kind of knowing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Because it was never really, this whole journey since then has kind of been a little bit organic. It's sort of like I've been called as opposed to stepping out in a certain direction. It came like even back in the days of you, it just so happened that, the process that I went through to kind of get myself back up on my feet again was interesting to some people. And as I talked about my own journey with that, it triggered off things in their own life. And then I found friends were asking me, not advice, but just wanting to have conversations. And it just kind of went from there. So there was no kind of real plan to be or do anything in that space. It's just kind of evolved the way it has. But now I feel like, because that's nearly 10 years ago now I feel like I've got some miles under my belt, and I can be a little bit more confident and a little bit more self-assured that I can be of great service to people. And so I feel this year like I can step up a little bit. I can see a little bit how that looks like, but I'm kind of working my way through what exactly that's going to look like. But at the moment, I can just feel that fire beginning to stoke up again. Back to that symbolicness of what's going on around me. I think that's always interesting. If you look at the myths and the stories, it's always, you're always informed by what's happening outside of you to heed the call, right? You've got to kind of decide what you're going to look at and what you're going to pay attention to. And to me, that's really calling. Again, I've come up with the word focus for this year as my kind of mantra, if you will. And what's interesting in that is that the word focus is an old Roman word that means domestic hearth.
Domestic what?
Hearth, like fireplace.
Okay.
Hearth. And that came to be known in Roman terms as it moved from that domestic hearth to kind of sacred fire. So when we use the word focus, we're talking about that sacred fire, which to me is, again, that fire within us. And so now whenever I see anything about the bushfires or whatever, anything else externally, I'm just called back to my mantra of focus. And, it's becoming pretty laser-like because, you can feel yourself getting drawn into these pockets of despair and grief and anxiety. And I'm just like, focus. So come back to your higher call and come back to what it is that you've been put here for.
So how is this different from the creation and the action that you were taking as a younger man, accomplishing those great things and experiencing all those things in life, and then moving to the corporate space?
The call to adventure that came was my dad's voice. As a young man, I was always a bit of a yo-yo because I started off, the first thing I did was, I had a bit of a career flying hot air balloons, as you know, which was kind of me trying to escape reality to a certain degree. It also gave me a lot of flexibility for having a really good time. But then kind of when things settled, I spent some time in Africa, as you know, at the end of that career. And then when I came back from Africa, my mind was set to have a quote unquote regular life. And so I jumped into the corporate world and did the things that I did corporately for the next nearly 20 years. But that was dad. It was all dad. And I think I've spoken to you before about this, but I think a lot of young men have this desire to outdo their dads. And I think sometimes the easiest way to measure whether you've outdone your dad is to do something similar to him so that you can compare and contrast very easily. And I actually remember, and it's not a pleasant memory, but it's profound. I remember sitting on a window ledge at my apartment in Hong Kong, having been given a promotion at Time Warner, and I was looking out over Hong Kong. And, my thought that came into my head was, I bet dad never earned this much. And I was like, was that it? Was that the reason I spent all this time getting to this point to be able to actually have that happen, you know, and from that moment on, my corporate, I just unwound it, you know, and certain things happened, you know, like my sister taking her own life, which were very instrumental in getting me out of the corporate world. But I really think that was the beginning point when I started to think, hang on a second, why am I really doing this? Like, is this really what I was called for? Is this really my soul's purpose? To be working my ass off for someone else, not really enjoying it, you know, getting to the point where I looked at my boss and it was like, I never want to be him. I never want to have that job. And it's like, well, then what am I aspiring to? You know? And so from that point on, you know, I guess, you know the rest. And I was dragged underground pretty harshly from a health diagnosis and, you know, losing Sam and losing my mum. And, you know, and when I reappeared, it was this. And, you know, I didn't even realize that that's what I was being called to for a while. I was just kind of doing it. More out of probably survival than anything else. But as a result, you know, having sat in that grief, having sat in that place underground, I guess I learned a few things. And now, you know, I'm 51 years of age. So, you know, a lot of the guys that come to the circle are just at the beginning phase of that. So I feel like I've got something to offer.
Can let's take the next part, the last part, to perhaps turn our focus and direct our discussion towards the men listening, who are of course part of the Warrior Within Men's Circle, which has undergone some changes over the time that it's been up and running. I was there at, I guess, the beginning, if you would say that, and have seen it through. Could you tell us a little bit about the Warrior Within and what it means to you?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I mean, the group began, as you remember, as a place for men to come together and meditate. That was basically it, because I looked around and I could see that most of the places that were offering meditation were kind of yoga studios, and they kind of had a very feminine aspect to them. Like, you'd walk in there and you know, there was a very feminine kind of feel to it. It was normally, you know, run by women, and there's absolutely, obviously, nothing wrong with that. But I was getting anecdotally, you know, men coming to me saying, you know, they didn't feel entirely comfortable in that space, you know, dropping into meditation, becoming vulnerable, whatever it happened to be. And so I said, well, what would it look like if I started a kind of a men's group where we just got together and meditated, and people jumped in like yourself, and it kind of became a thing. So I guess I started off by putting together like a 6-week program. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was. I think it was 12.
6 or 12-week program. Can't remember. Yeah, and so I felt like there was kind of a trajectory rather than just coming every week and kind of, you know, doing meditation and then leaving again. I thought, well, okay, well, as guys, as men, we can go on a 12-week journey together. And this idea of the warrior basically came to me. You know, it's nothing new, but for me, it was reading the book Iron John, which, and I've written about this and spoken about it. So, you know, I'm happy to share. But, you know, there was a moment in my life when, towards the end of my corporate career, when I really felt like I was done and I was ready to kind of throw in the towel in a big way, and I removed myself from the planet, basically. And I made the decision that on a Friday night that I wasn't going back in on Monday. Now, how much truth there was to that, or whether that was just a story in my head, I don't know. But that weekend I picked up Iron John and, you know, read it from cover to cover, and you know, it may have gone some distance, kind of saving my life at that point in time. It just made so much sense to me. And, you know, from within that, I was calling on the archetype of the wild man, this idea of the work that men, you know, the ashes work of being underground, and all these metaphors that I use quite a lot, all kind of sprung from that place. So I guess the course was kind of designed around that. You know, the wild man essentially and the warrior essentially well, certainly the warrior being an aspect of the wild man. But to me, when I looked at men back then, you know, I saw a bunch of men, you know, wearing their armor, you know, putting their mask on every single day. And the idea was that that was a form of warrior, but it wasn't the true masculinity. It wasn't the real warrior. It wasn't the golden warrior or the warrior within. And so the idea was, could I take men from the outer warrior that they were using to the inner warrior over a 12-week period? At least not take them there, but at least help them understand the journey, and maybe together we could learn a few, you know, get a few tools together, you know. And it's kind of what happened, right?
Absolutely. Like I said in the intro, it was instrumental in helping me through that period, and my first introduction to men's work. I had read Iron John, interestingly, and also Stephen Biddulph, Manhood. They were the first two, and Way of the Superior Man, which I know a lot of men have read as well. But those two, but more than Way of Superior Man, those two books, and I think I read Manhood first, and just noticed that he referenced the hell out of Iron John in that book, and I said, well, it's so interesting that I have these two books in front of me now. So I went from Manhood into Iron John, and I didn't quite get through it as quickly as you. I think it probably took me a couple of months to work my way through, because it's when you're not, I wasn't, it was the first entry point into that kind of language, and it was quite profound for me. So, okay, that brings us to where we are now, and where do you think it's going, or what?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We were doing a few things this year. It's still kind of yet to play out in some forms, but we're having the conversations, which is great. You know, we put together a group of guys that are kind of, yourself included, Nathan, that are going to hopefully lead us into the next phase of what we become. But, you know, it really is, it's as I said, in kind of defining Warrior Within, and right back to the beginning of our conversations, it's just about sitting with guys and examining where you're hurt, you know, allowing yourself to take that difficult journey, if you will, and look at the uncomfortable parts of your life rather than do things to avoid them. And I guess what I found is when you do that in brotherhood, it becomes quite easy. And for me, I guess part of what worked in the beginning, just going back, and, you know, maybe you'll agree with that, is what I tried to be from the very beginning was just radically open about my own journey. And I think that my thought was that I was more than happy to share that with the men who made the decision to come, because I figured, like, if you walk through the door, that was the biggest part. You know, any man that walked through the door was worthy of being a brother of mine, you know what I mean? Because that's a big deal, particularly if you've never sat around a group of men before and done anything like that. It's sometimes the hardest part is just to arrive. And I thought, you know, if I was radically open about my own life, and that would help men to dig into theirs, and I think it worked, right? And then there were guys like you in the group in the beginning who were also radically open, and I think it just worked. So now, you know, the next steps, well, it's definitely largely the same thing, just on a bigger scale. I mean, as you know, I'm really, when it comes to men's work, I really follow the work of Michael Mead and Robert Bly, who's still alive, although he's, you know, not very active in the space anymore, and James Hillman, who's sadly not alive anymore. But those guys, like, I sit back and I listen to the recordings of some of their men's circles, you know, and it's just like, you can just, like, I get goosebumps, you know, 1,000 men, you know, and the poetry, the storytelling, and the drumming and the singing, and yeah, I remember Robert Bly saying, you know, whenever I'm in a place of deep grief, I just have to take myself back to one of those circles that we had. I just have to take myself back to the energy that I felt, and that it's enough.
Where did it go?
Yeah, where did it go? I mean, I think those guys just got but with Robert Bly especially, I think he just, I think he just got a little bit jaded with the whole thing. I mean, I think Michael Mead's still very, very active, but he's more of he's a little bit of a Joseph Campbell character these days. He's really into myth and storytelling, and his podcasts are beautiful, but they're very mythological. You know what I mean? And that resonates with a lot of people, but maybe for some it doesn't. It certainly resonates with me. I mean, you know me, I love, like, we're narrative creatures, we're storytelling creatures, and our whole life is basically a story. That our body, our cells respond in terms of health and well-being to the stories that we're giving it. Like we're literally just stories from top to bottom. So for me, if I'm going to learn about my life and grow, it's going to be it's going to be through story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and letting go of the stories that don't serve you, and reframing, and just all that stuff, to me is the most powerful. So that's largely what this circle is going to be about. Yeah, it's just that, and just, I think at the bottom of it all, man, I don't think most men realize how much they crave being in brotherhood. It's almost like you resist it in a way, because it seems like something that's not for you. And then I've had so many men come up to me and say, I had no idea how much I needed this. I had no idea how much I craved being amongst my brothers, and how, it's a time in the week that I just look forward to all week,
Yeah, it's not something that you can know until you've experienced it. And I was thinking this today while I was getting my hair cut at the barber, which is one of those places where men gather. But I was thinking, the barber shop, the pub, the footy field, right, the locker room. These are places where, and the construction site. Let's add that. These are places where men spend time, a lot of time, with other men. But at the same time, I was thinking, this is not brotherhood. This is not real time with other men. You're physically around other men, but it's not the same as sitting in a circle. It's not the same as going to that level of depth or that kind of thing. I don't think I have a question, but it was just an observation that came up while you were talking, is that there are lots of men who spend time with other men, lots of men. So I think that would be quite confusing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There's a vast difference, isn't there? Not always, but most of the time, between those gatherings and the ones that we're talking about. And I remember when I was spending some time in Africa, living in Africa there, and the way that it worked. The men would disappear, and go bush for a little while, and you weren't sure when they were going to come back, and it was just part of the culture there. And it's just, it wasn't going to the footy; it was an entirely sacred space that those guys were creating. And I remember I had the opportunity to go out once or twice with these guys, and there was a vast amount of time where you just sat in silence, and it was yeah, I had, as a young man, I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. And like, I remember sitting there, and I was sitting next to this older guy. It's difficult, an elder, definitely, and we'd been sitting in silence for quite a while, and this flock of birds came over the top, and he just sort of looked at them like that, and then they went, and the noise died down, and he just looked back at me, and he just held my gaze for ages, and then he just sort of nodded his head in approval, like ever so slightly. It was just like, this little nod as if to say, that was fucking awesome. Did you see that? You know what I mean? and it was just so, in the silence, it was almost like zero movement, but he conveyed so much to me, And I was just, as a young man, it was just these feelings. I was just like, holy shit, this is,
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Like,
Yeah.
like that nod that just says, this is it.
Yeah.
All is as it should be. This is life, you know.
Mm.
This is
Yeah, this is aliveness, this is vividness, and this is feeling it. You know, you're allowed to feel it, and I think we've engendered some of that within the circle because you know, with like many guys within that circle, and obviously yourself included. But I feel like I don't have to say much to express what I'm feeling with these guys anymore. It's a bit like that moment with the old guy in Africa where you know I can almost know where people are at just you know when I hug them or just coming up to in meeting. It's like because I know these guys so well now and they know me. You know, I mean, you know, when something's up with me, I don't even have to say anything, and vice versa, and that's what we're looking for here. I think that kind of brotherhood. I'm sure if Tom and Lucas are listening right now, like that, they were saying, you know, not an issue to share a story like this because they're at the Botanical Gardens, I think, or somewhere, and Lucas was leaving and he still had like a few hours left on his parking ticket, and of course, you know, us beautiful guys, man, you know, he went to pay it forward, and the guy sort of was just coming into park, and he was like going to go up to the window and knock on the window and give him the ticket to say, here, look, man, you know, I'm leaving. There's still a few hours on this, and it was Tom.
Oh.
And it's just like when those two meet, having sat in brotherhood for such a long time, it's like you know, and you just don't get that normally, you know. And there's just this thing that happens, and you know, knowing that I've had something to do with that, it fills me with joy.
Mm. Well, I'm glad we got the chance to do this. I'm also, I also feel like this is quite a big thing. You know, more than just sitting down opposite each other and having a chat. I can't help but feel like for me, this is something that I've wanted to do for ages and ages, but never really did or never really stepped into. And now having the opportunity to do this within this group, a group that I was at the formation of, and to be able to connect and to share all of this stuff with all the men, and then to share it with more people is really an honor for me and quite a huge thing. So I want to say thank you, not just for joining me tonight, but thank you for your presence, your friendship, your mentorship, your help, and your love over the last couple of years of my life. Yeah, I couldn't even begin to express how much you mean to me, really, and how much and how much my life now has been impacted by the time that we spent together and that we continue to spend together. So thank you.